Chapter 51 Shameless Woman. Chu Qingju sat high up in the side hall, calmly looking down at the two women sitting beneath her. She had seen Wei Ranzhuang before, and as for this Wei Xian Qi who'd wanted to meet her, Chu Qingju strangely felt that she looked somewhat similar to Liang Shi. His Highness Duan Wang, when he was younger, had actually piggybacked our Yetu. It's been so many years now. His Highness Duan Wang has already gotten married and our Yetu is almost grown up and ready for marriage herself. Wei Xian Qi sighed and reluctantly said to Chu Qingju, "Time passes by so quickly." Chu Qingju smiled and motioned for Wei Xian Qi to continue speaking. Wei Xian Qi hated that Duan Wang Fei could sit there so calmly, unmoved by her words. She took a sip of tea before continuing. At the end of last year, our entire family had finally returned to Jing from the outside post. It was all thanks to His Highness Duan Wang's kindness that our family received an adequately good job here. Ran Yetu, as his cousin, always thought about the boon His Highness Duan Wang gave us, but since there is a separation of sexes, they were unable to meet each other. Today, I will give my thanks to Wang Fei. If I'm lucky, we'll get to personally thank Wang Ye as well. Wei Ranzhuang seized the opportunity to stand and bow to Chu Qingju. "Ranzhuang thanks Biao Ji, thanks Biao Sao." Chu Qingju felt her teeth were getting a bit sore. She looked at the color of the sky outside and then at the mother and daughter duo who had been sitting there for almost 4 hours. These two were most likely waiting for He Hung to return to the Fu. She smiled and replied, "Biao Mei doesn't have to be so courteous. As Gaig and Sayazai, it's proper to treat Mimi and family members well. Wang Fei is virtuous." Wei Qianqiu took advantage of her words, and shamelessly proclaimed, "Shuang Yetu has always really liked His Highness Duan Wang, her Biao Ji. Just speaking about it, I'm afraid you will laugh. Even now, she still remembers how His Highness Duan Wang cared for her in the past. How thick did a person's skin have to be that she could say to a woman that her daughter liked the woman's husband?" Chu Qingju jerked the corners of her mouth. She heard that this Wei Xian Qi was of the same clan and branch as Qin Bai Lu, but just more distant in relation. The Qin family was a well-educated noble family. How did it produce a woman such as Wei Xian Qi? Yin Lu, who was standing behind Chu Qingju, heard her words. The rage on her face was barely hidden. It was only the fact that she was more afraid of making it difficult for Wang Fei that made her suppress it. But her gaze, as she stared down at the mother and daughter pair of the Wei family, became increasingly cold. He, Chu Qingju raised the teacup for a sip to hide the mirth that nearly surged up within her. "Wang Ye had never mentioned Biao Mei to me." The smile on Wei Qianqi's face froze. She instantly replied, "Wang Ye is occupied with a myriad of state affairs. He wouldn't have remembered to discuss such minor things when he returns to the Fu." "What does Wei Furan mean?" Chu Qingju's face darkened. "Wang Ye is just an imperial son. Where does this myriad of state affairs come from? Furthermore, Wang Ye usually resides in Zhengyuan and he always talks about the household matters with me. Why does it seem like you mean that Wang Ye has matters he doesn't like discussing with Ben Wang Fei?" Wei Qianqi was in shock. She didn't think that Duan Wang Fei could change faces so quickly without a hint of warning. She paused for a second before regrouping and said, "Please forgive me, Wang Fei. Chen Fu meant no such thing." Wei Ranzhuang bowed to Chu Qingju with a pale face as she joined in, "Please Wang Fei, don't be angry. Mother wasn't being deliberate and didn't mean it like that. We are all related here. There's no need to be so strict." Chu Qingju's face softened and she smiled again. After she motioned for Wei Ranzhuang to sit down again, she continued, "If Wei Furan didn't mean it, then it's naturally good." Wei Qianqi had never seen someone who could change expressions so fast. Right now, as Chu Qingju smiled, she could only follow, "Chen Fu doesn't know how to speak. It's lucky that Wang Fei doesn't object. Wang Fei is really tolerant." The thoughtless words of normal people, "I won't get angry at it," Chu Qingju replied calmly. "Why isn't Biao Mei attending in front of Mufei, and also left the palace?" Wei Ranzhuang answered in a small voice, Guifei Niang was worried that my family missed me, so she sent me back to the Fu. Was Wang Fei implying that they were normal people and not worth bothering with? Mufei is always very considerate. Chu Qingju examined Wei Ranjuang from head to toe. I see your bones are thin and weak. When you return to your Fu, you should eat more. She then let Rui Xiang and Chu Kui bring out some quality medicinal herbs for Wei Xian Qi to take back. We shouldn't let Wang Fei spend so much. Wei Xian Qi stood and gave her thanks. She saw the sky was becoming darker and darker and no one had reported Wang Yi's return to the Fu. She was getting impatient, but she still wanted to wait. She could only rudely sit and not bid farewell. Chu Qingju wasn't in any rush either. She was waiting for He Hung to return. These two women were so interesting that if He Hung didn't experience this for himself, how would the suffering she underwent this afternoon be justified? Wei Ranjuang was unable to sit still in her seat. She might have been interested in Duan Wang, but her face was much thinner. Seeing Wang Fei staring pointedly at her, she felt her face heat up and didn't dare to meet Chu Qingju's eyes. Just then, Xiao Ganzi hurriedly walked in and bowed to Chu Qingju. He said lightly, Wang Fei, Wang Ye has returned. Wei Ranjuang's eyes were immediately filled with light. She raised her head slightly and saw the other woman reveal a bright smile. Even though she was a woman, she had to admit that Duan Wang Fei was attractive. Since Wang Ye has returned, why don't we greet Wang Ye? Wei Xian Qi positioned herself as an elder by sitting on the chair and commented, Chen Fu hasn't seen His Highness for so many years. Xiao Ganzi was still standing, his body bent at the waist. Upon hearing Wei Xian Qi's words, he twisted his mouth in disdain. No wonder this Wei Xiaoji looked so petty-minded. With such a mother, how good of a daughter could she raise? A not even closely related Jimu had the nerve to posture as an elder in front of Wang Fei. If you gave them an inch, they would take a mile. They should take a good look at their rank before acting. Wang Ye is here. Chu Qingju stood and saw He Hung striding towards her. She smiled and went forward, their two hands naturally coming together. Today, you're later than usual. There were more matters to attend to, so you had to wait a bit longer. He Hung brought her along and they sat before looking down at Wei Xian Qi and Wei Ranjuang standing below. Wei Furen and Wei Xiaoji have enough free time to visit Ben Wang's Fu. He didn't need to use courtesy towards these kind of people. The imposing manner of a Wang Ye came out naturally. Wei Xian Qi felt an indescribable sense of awe. She gave He Hung a bow of greeting. Since returning to Jing, I haven't seen Wang Ye and Wang Fei, so today I brought my daughter here to greet Wang Fei. It must have been great trouble for you to come. Wang Fei has already met Wei Xiaoji at the palace. He Hung raised Chu Qingju's teacup to take a mouthful. He calmly remarked, based on Mu Fei's ancestors, you are Ben Wang's elders. How can it be that you came here to meet us? Wang Ye isn't someone we can compare to. Wei Xian Qi's tone, as she spoke, became politer. She carefully said, Shuang Yetu kept talking about her memories when you were younger, so Chen Fu had to come here with this Yetu. The hand that held his teacup stilled. What did those words mean? He turned his head to look at Chu Qingju. As expected, he saw that there were hints of ice in the other's mirth. He slightly furrowed his eyebrows and commented, Wei Xiaoji had only met with Ben Wang a few times during our younger years. These words Wei Furen has spoken are perhaps too inappropriate. Wei Xian Qi heard that Duan Wang didn't have any interest in her daughter. The smile on her face became ugly. After a beat, she replied, Wang Ye is too serious. You are cousins, there's no need to care too much. He Hung expressionlessly stated, protecting females when the males are older is human nature. Yin Lu, get someone to bring hot water for Wang Ye so that he can wash his hands. Chu Qingju stood to look outside. It's late now and almost time for the evening meal. How about you two stay for the meal? Wei Xian Qi saw that Duan Wang wasn't currently interested in her daughter and lost her desire to stay. She smiled and stood, bidding farewell. Then I won't disturb Wang Ye and Wang Fei any further. Chen Fu will say her goodbyes. Take care. We won't bother seeing you out. He Hung nodded slightly, not saying a word to detain them. This caused Wei Xian Qi's heart to become colder, and she understood that the matter was most likely closed for discussion. Coming out of Duan Wangfu, Wei Xian Qi and Wei Ranzhuang went inside their carriage to go back to their fu. Wei Xian Qi sighed and said to her daughter sitting beside her, I haven't met this Duan Wangfei previously. Now that I've seen her, the matter of you entering Duan Wangfu will most likely be a struggle. She wanted her daughter to enter Duan Wangfu, but from the moment Duan Wang came into when they left, he hadn't even properly looked at her daughter once. He had completely disregarded her daughter. Daughter knows, Wei Ranzhuang bit her lips as she pleaded, but mother, daughter wants to enter Duan Wangfu. Wei Xian Qi sighed. After a long time, she said, we'll think of some other way. Inside Duan Wangfu, Chu Qingju focused on washing her hands, not saying a word. Angry. He Hung looked at her dark face and her unwillingness to speak. After he dried his hands, he moved to sit next to Chu Qingju. Don't be angry over such a muddle-headed woman. In the future, we won't allow them to enter the fu. If you don't let them enter, how will you be able to look at your childhood sweetheart Biao Mei? Chu Qingju glanced from the corner of her eye, gently snorting, otherwise, tomorrow there will be some other Biao Mei who will also be saying how much she thinks of you. Men usually didn't value women who pushed themselves upon others. Inside, there was even a hint of looking down at them. Chu Qingju knew that He Hung had that hint when he looked at Wei Ranzhuang. This was one of the reasons why she wanted the two women to stay until He Hung came back to the fu. I don't want her so she can't be forced in. He Hung saw that she still had a dark face and could only comfort her. Didn't we already say there's only Qingju? You are peerless. Ben Wang doesn't even want to take a second look at other women. Don't be angry, it's not good for the body, N. Reaching out with her hand to gently twist on his forearm, Chu Qingju turned her head to state, you said it, I didn't force you. These are the words of my heart. He Hung smiled as he caressed her hair. Let them serve the evening meal. Didn't you want to play Wiki? Later, I'll play a match with you. Chu Qingju reluctantly nodded. Standing in the corner, Xiao Ganzi thought that the members of the Wei family were blind to not know how much importance Wang Ye placed on Wang Fei. This ingratiating manner, if he told anyone, he was afraid no one would believe it. It was most likely that Wang Ye had, after today, marked a strike against the entire family of Wei Xian Qi. Chapter 52 Jing Guifei's Strategy. The news that the Wei family's Gunyang went to the Wang Fu to offer herself on a pillow had somehow passed into the ears of Jing Guifei. Originally, she felt that Wei Ranzhuang was an indecisive person, but now she believed that this was a Gunyang who had no sense of conduct and has subsequently dirted the Wei family's reputation. Thankfully, they didn't share the same grandfather. Otherwise, even she would be compromised. Ding Mama, said Jing Guifei in a cold voice and a dark expression on her face, you go with Ben Gong's sign to personally visit Wei Lang Zhong's Ifu. Just say that Qian Qi's moral conduct is lacking and she has improperly educated her daughter. I hope that he can admonish his wife and daughters so that the reputation of the Wei clan is not adversely affected. If he cannot, then there will be no interactions between the two Fu in the future. This Tang Ge of hers was mediocre with no great ability. He had properly fulfilled his duties outside, and once he'd returned to Jing, it was only because of Hunger's efforts that he'd received the position of a 5th-grade Lang Zhong in the Ministry of Revenue. No mother liked a woman who recommended herself to be a bedwarmer for her son. Jing Guifei was no exception. Even if this woman was a relative of her maternal family, and that as a Guifei, she had no power to send a decree, she could still lecture on any inadequacies found within the clan. Many Fei in the past had been accused and imprisoned for not effectively controlling their clan's behavior. Ding Mama was the most favored among Jing Guifei's servants. When she arrived on a green-clothed carriage at Wei Lang Zhong's residence, the servants at that Fu were very courteous to her. Wei Lang Zhong himself even went to the gate to greet her, and he ushered her into the main hall, which was used to receive valued guests. Ding Mama courteously bowed to Wei Langzhong and rejected Wei Langzhong's offer when he told the servants to bring in refreshments. Wei Ren, this old one has come today to pass on some words from Guifei Niang Niang. What does Guifei Niang Niang have to say? Wei Langzhong rose from his seat and lifted his hands to perform a bow in the direction of the palace. Please, Mama, tell me. Ding Mama looked at the honest and sincere Wei Langzhong and sighed for him. This distantly related Biao Ge of Niang Niang was a good man. It was a pity that he had such a troublesome Ditu wife. He was only a small 5th grade Langzhong in the Ministry of Revenue. It seems he wouldn't get a chance to climb any higher. She bent at the waist as she spoke. A few days earlier, Niang Niang heard some vague rumors and felt worried. She then requested this old one to send word to Ren. She raised her head to look at Wei Langzhong and saw his face was full of concern. It was clear that he was still in the dark as to what had happened. Niang Niang said that Wei Furen's moral conduct is lacking, and she has improperly taught her daughter. She's afraid that the reputation of the Wei clan would be affected and hopes that Ren would be able to advise her. After hearing Ding Mama's words, Wei Langzhong's face turned dark and then white. A while later, he finally forced some sound out of his throat. I hope Mama can clearly explain what my wife and unfilial daughter have done. Ding Mama looked at him in sympathy. She made a bow, saying, this matter, Ren should ask your Furen. This old one has to return to the palace to serve Niang Niang. Goodbye. Wei Langzhong didn't know what happened, but he understood that Guifei Niang Niang was feeling discontent with his family. His heart started to tremble as he waited for Ding Mama to enter the carriage before he turned to walk towards the Niiwan. Because he was only a 5th grade Langzhong, his residence was just a 2-entry compound, but it was located at a very good area. Because the seller had favorably considered his familial connection to His Highness Duan Wang, it was easy for him to purchase the compound. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to live at that location. In the city of Jing, the location of residence was a symbol of status. It wasn't possible to buy a house with just money. When he came into the courtyard, he saw that Qian Shi was chastising a servant. His face was dark as he motioned for the punished servant to retreat. He asked icily, what good deed did you do recently? What did I do? Wei Qian Qi had a bad expression on her face as she looked at Wei Langzhong. Her voice rose in pitch as she demanded, Wei Ruji, speak clearly. What have I done that warranted such an expression on your face? The servants, who were standing nearby, saw the situation escalating and carefully retreated to the corners, trying to bury their heads deeper. If you didn't do anything, Guifei Niang Niang wouldn't have sent someone to express her displeasure. Wei Ruji's face was ashen as he saw Wei Qian Qi's shrewish manner. All these years, I've always endured your behavior, but I cannot allow you to ruin the reputation of my Wei family. Wei family? Wei Qian Qi sneered, pointing at Wei Ruiji as she scolded, you think you are so important? Go see if Guifei Niang Niang would look favorably upon you. That branch is one family, we aren't anything. You are yelling at me because you want to boast that your Wei family has a Guifei Niang Niang. My Qin family is an educated noble family. Who knows how many Niang Niang were my ancestors? I don't want you showing off in front of me. Stupid woman. Wei Ruiji was so angry that he threw his hand at Wei Qian Qi's face. His personality was usually gentle, but now he was furious enough to threaten, how did I marry a woman like you? If you really feel that the Qin family is good, I'll help you. A letter of divorce 3 doesn't require much effort. Don't keep telling me about how great the Qin family is. I didn't say anything in the past because you raised my children. Since you have become so shameless, I don't have to cover for you anymore. You can go to the main Qin clan to complain and see if they will recognize you. You're just a distant side branch, don't think you're somebody. Wei Qian Qi opened her mouth but couldn't say a word. She was so used to being the sole decision-maker and Wei Ruji rarely interfered. Now he was saying he would give her a letter of divorce. She felt as if cold water had been poured over her head. She was furious yet afraid. Acting as if he had reached the end of his rope, Wei Xian became angrier as he spoke. Now that the children are grown, you don't have to worry about me slighting them. I won't marry again in the future. As soon as you say the word, I'll give the divorce to you immediately, and avoid wronging you. Wei Xian, I've raised your children. I have put so much in. Now you want to kick me aside. Wei Xian Qi grabbed a reason out of thin air and instantly shrieked, now that the children have all grown up, you don't need me anymore and you despise this old woman. It won't be that easy. She surged forward to scratch Wei Xian's face. Wei Xian pushed her aside. He icily retorted, if it wasn't for the children, I would have divorced you a long time ago. If you don't want me to divorce you, then just quietly stay in the Fu. Your Qin family is educated and noble, so they're not worried about tarnishing their reputation. But my Wei family is smaller in comparison and they cannot afford to lose theirs. He left the courtyard with a swish of his sleeves. Wei Xian Qi sat on the floor, tears and snot running down her face. After crying for a long time, she used her sleeves to wipe her face clean. Thinking about her husband had said to her, she understood that Jing Guifei was displeased about her trip to Duan Wangfu. She uttered hatefully, you really believe that your family's son is the greatest in the world? When another Wang Ye succeeds the throne, let's see how arrogant you are then. Wei Ranchuang stood at the window and watched as her father and mother fought in the courtyard. She couldn't help but start sobbing. Father was usually gentle. He must have gotten into such a vicious fight with mother today because of her. She started sobbing harder. Gunyang, don't cry, her Yawan carefully comforted her, if Furen saw, she would be worried. Wei Ranchuang stilled and stared in shock at Wei Xian Qi standing in the middle of the courtyard. Mother was in a disheveled state. Father had humiliated mother in front of all the servants. How could mother run the household in the future? It's all my fault. Otherwise, it wouldn't have ended up like this. Her tears ran down again. The news of Wei Xian Qi being harshly scolded by Wei Xian hadn't spread beyond the walls, but Jing Guifei knew. She understood that this was Wei Xian's way of expressing his resolve and decision. After she finished listening to what the servant reported, she nodded, this should have been done earlier. Ben Gong's distant Tangxiang just was too soft. She turned to look at Chu Qingju sitting beneath her, you don't have to worry any longer. Wei Ranchuang, that Yetu, won't be entering the Fu. Chu Qingju blinked her eyes. A beat later, she said, thanks Mufei, Erxi had been worried about on how to treat her if she had entered the Fu. What treatment? She's just a key. Jing Guifei drank a mouthful of tea, her tone icy, this kind of person wants to enter the Wang Fu. Did she really think that any kind of toy could serve my son? Chu Qingju slightly lowered her head. Her attitude revealed that she didn't really hear know or understand these words. Raising her head and seeing her Erxifu's naive manner, the corners of Jing Guifei's lips jerked. A smarter person would have been saying some good words right now to make her happy. Why was her Erxi just sitting there? You have been married to Hunger for half a year now. Jing Guifei changed the topic abruptly. Ben Gong was the same age as you when I entered the palace that year. It took almost 4 years after I entered when I had Hunger. At that time, the position of the fetus wasn't right and it wasn't easy giving birth. The midwife mama said that it was lucky that Ben Gong was almost 20 when giving birth. The bones in the body had matured. Otherwise, it was quite possible that both of us would have died. Even though I couldn't have any more children, Ben Gong has no regrets since Hunger is a filial child. Chu Qingju stilled. She hadn't thought that Jing Guifei would say such a thing to her. She looked at the beautiful matron in front of her. She always had the bearing of one high in status, but these words revealed the feelings that a mother had for her son. Jing Guifei wanted her and her son to have a good relationship and even hinted that she didn't have to be in a rush to have children. It didn't matter if only a fraction of the concern was for her well-being. At least, the other hoped that she would survive labor so she can raise her own children. She carefully digested these words. Maybe her popo really was telling her not to be in any rush, and let it occur naturally. Mufei must have had a hard time raising Wang Ye in those years. Chu Qingju smiled and remarked, no wonder Wang Ye always remembers Mufei. He even knows what desserts Mufei likes and dislikes. The smile on Jing Guifei's face became more prominent. A hint of mirth made its way into her voice. As a mother, one always wants the child to be well. Nothing else is needed. Chu Qingju thought of her deceased parents. When they had been alive, they had protected her like she was the apple of their eye. When she had wanted to learn dancing, they put all their effort into supporting her. They treasured all the pictures of her performances. But when they died, no one else had treated her as well as they did. Seeing her Erxifu's mood had become somewhat downcast, Jing Guifei remembered that her Erxi's birth mother was deceased. For some reason, she felt that the other was quite pitiful and patted the back of her hand. Just recently, Ben Gong's kitchen created a new type of pastry. Ben Gong has found it quite delicious. You should have a taste too. She ordered a servant to get some pastries from the kitchen. Chu Qingju looked up at Jing Guifei. She smiled and said, thanks Mufei. Jing Guifei looked at her sparkling eyes and smiled. She said, for such a minor thing, there's no need for thanks. You've brought so many things into the palace today. It's fine if Mufei gives you a plate of pastries in exchange. The food at Mufei's palace is so delicious. If it weren't for gossip mongers, Erxi would be coming here to eat every day. Chu Qingju wrinkled her brow. The stuff made in the Fu's kitchen doesn't compare to what Mufei has here. The corners of Jing Guifei's mouth trembled. You are scorning the Wang Fu in front of your popo. Did you even think of how Ben Gong would feel? Even if you were trying to purposefully flatter me. But seeing that honest gaze made Jing Guifei believe that this Erxifu of hers really disliked the Wang Fu's kitchen. That's fine, Ben Gong will let someone copy the dishes and pastries you like and deliver it to the Fu. Jing Guifei smiled as she reassured her. She didn't want the others to assume that the chefs in Duan Wang Fu were useless. Such a stupid Erxifu, she definitely was not feeling sorry for her. Title of an official. 2 legitimate/first wife. The original spouse of a man. In many cases, the second wife, if the original wife had died, would not be from a family higher in rank than the first wife. 3. Literally cease letter. A letter that a man will give to his wife to end the marriage which has to occur for one or more of 7 reasons: childlessness, adultery, unfilialness, chattiness, stealing, jealousy, and serious illness. Chapter 53 Road. When Chu Qingju visited the Zhongjing Palace, she had taken many things with her. When she left, she still had many things with her. The bystanders looked on and marveled at the maternal and filial love between Jing Guifei and Duan Wangfei. Chu Qingju looked back at the servants who had accompanied her to the palace. They all had their hands full. She couldn't help but sigh. From a certain perspective, Jing Guifei was a really good popo in the Dalong dynasty. Intelligent, beautiful, and she's able to prioritize what was important. This kind of woman, if she's placed in a novel, would most definitely be the main character. It was a pity that she had met a man like Qingde Emperor. Even though she needed to be careful around Jing Guifei because her popo was too smart, she still was a much better popo compared to Shu Guifei. If she was a normal popo, she would have pushed her to have children immediately rather than telling her not to rush. Even in Chu Qingju's previous life, this kind of conduct wasn't something many mother-in-laws would do. But this kind of popo might not like an Erxi who was too intelligent. Their current form of interaction was good enough. Inside Zhongjing Palace, Ding Mama returned from seeing Duan Wangfei off. Walking in front of Jing Guifei, she reported in a small voice, "Niang Niang, Wangfei has left." Jing Guifei nodded. She sighed and remarked, "Hunger has set his heart on her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have implicitly asked her not to make things difficult for Chu Qingju. It's a good thing that Wang Ye and Wang Fei have deep feelings for each other, Ding Mama came up to massage her shoulders. She said in a light voice, if it was like the pair at the other Fu, wouldn't they have become a laughingstock of Jing City? You are right, Jing Guifei laughed, Chu Shi is still young. It would be best for her child if she gives birth a year or two from now. If the mother is too young, the child would be born sickly and that would be alarming. If her son and daughter-in-law were fighting like the pair at Rui Wangfu, then that would be really worrisome. Her own Erxi might be simple-minded and naive, but it was infinitely better than having a Wang Fei like Qin Shi. Niang is highly principled, Ding Mama said, it is Wang Fei's great fortune to have a popo like you. In the beginning, Ben Gong didn't like her unworldliness. But upon closer examination, despite being somewhat stupid, she isn't disagreeable. As long as they maintain their good relationship, Ben Gong will not become a villain. Jing Guifei smiled as she shook her head, but it is remarkable that Hung Er sing her praises to me. Ding Mama had served Jing Guifei for many years and knew that Niang was very good to Wang Fei. She naturally followed her lead as her mistress discussed the attributes of Wang Ye and Wang Fei. And the fact that Niang keeps saying Wang Fei was stupid. Such a stupid Wang Fei, and yet Niang still protected her. If that wasn't affection, then what else could it be? Not long after Chu Qingju came back to the Fu, He Hung returned home. When the two met, she first mentioned the gifts that Jing Guifei bestowed and sighed in admiration, Niang is so good to Wang Ye. She remembers you at every turn. When He Hung heard this, he smiled and remarked, didn't you already know that Mufei is good to me? Why are you mentioning it today? There is a phrase, love the house so love the crow. Wang Ye is that house, I am that crow. Chu Qingju passed on the words that Jing Guifei said to her, if it wasn't for Wang Ye, why else would Niang care so much for me? Hearing that, He Hung couldn't help but laugh, you. Chu Qingju heard him laugh in response, yet he didn't confirm nor deny her statement. She smiled as she asked, it's still early today. Why don't I accompany Wang Ye in playing a match? The smile on He Hung's face instantly froze. He Hung looked at the smiling Chu Qingju. Who was really accompanying who? In the end, He Hung endured the pain as he played one round with Chu Qingju. The process was a tragic sight, but the ending was very beautiful. As to what kind of beauty, one could examine the evening meal that was eaten 2 hours later than usual and the hot water that was sent to the Zheng Yuan soon afterwards. The commander of the Imperial Guards was perhaps the busiest person in Jing City over the last 2 days. He, along with his subordinates, had tossed many bullies and gangsters into the prisons. Right now, not only did he have to think of ways to suppress the rumors spreading in Jing, but he also had to ensure that he didn't offend any of the major powers. He didn't know what the emperor was thinking. Even though there were countless voices opposing his actions in the royal court, the emperor still allowed Rui Wang to freely leave the Wangfu. He was even allowed to enter the imperial palace without any restrictions. That had disappointed many at court and cooled many hearts. Thinking about the mess, he couldn't help but sigh. He turned to order the subordinates behind him, keep investigating in the city and see if there are any more rumor-mongers. Yes, sir. The Imperial Guards instantly separated into several troops and entered the alleyways. Commander Sun raised his head to look at the sky. The weather wasn't very good. It looked like it was going to rain. As he was about to enter the palace, he saw a sedan moving not too far away. Behind the sedan, there were several people carrying luggage. It looked like a procession of dowry chests, but the sedan in front was blue in color, not a red-flowered one. There were also only 2 strong men carrying the sedan. He stared for a beat before realizing that some major personage was taking a Shi. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been such a big procession. But the amount of dowry that was being carried wasn't befitting of a Shi at all. I heard that the person inside is the San Ziaja of Changde Gongfu. Yes, it's that Fu's Ziaja. Such a good family, but now she's become a Shi. It's such a sin. What do you know? Look at that person being taken into Rui Wangfu, how can any normal person compare? Since the topic had changed to Rui Wang, the people who had come to see and gossip about the procession all scattered. They only hated that they couldn't walk any faster and that their mouths had been idle enough to discuss the matters of Rui Wangfu. Commander Sun sighed. He had an irritated expression on his face as he watched the common people ran away. Rui Wang's current reputation had almost reached a point where he was seen as the boogeyman by the public. The emperor might have done all he could to protect Rui Wang, but in the hearts of the common people, Rui Wang's reputation had fallen drastically. Commander Sun. Commander Sun turned his head and saw Ning Wang riding towards him on a black horse. He wore a black robe embroidered with silver patterns and had a sincere smile on his face. His heart tightened. The fact that Ning Wang and Rui Wang were at odds was an open secret at court. He was currently doing his best to protect Rui Wang's reputation. Ning Wang greeting him openly like this, did he have ulterior motives? Wei Chen greets Your Highness Ning Wang. Commander Sun walked in front of He Qi horse and made a bow. He asked, Does Your Highness Ning Wang have anything to ask of Wei Chen? Just saw Commander Sun here and came over to say hello. He Qi played with the horsewhip in his hand. He raised his chin in the direction of the blue sedan. Is that the key that Lao San took? Commander Sun lowered his head. Your Highness, Wei Chen doesn't know. He Qi stared steadily at Commander Sunday. From his view, he could only see the other's deeply lowered head and bent back. This leading commander of the Imperial Guards was a very smart person. Otherwise, Fu Huang wouldn't have put him in charge of the post. There are things in Jing that the commander of the Imperial Guards doesn't know. He Qi twirled his horsewhip, looking unconcerned. Lao San is really filial. He knows that Fu Huang's body isn't good now, so he took a key to flush away the bad luck. This filial love is really moving, don't you think so, Commander Sun? Commander Sun couldn't help but give a dry laugh. His Highness Ning Wang was outwardly complimenting Rui Wang, but everyone could hear the sarcasm. Since when did taking a key ensure that the bad luck would be flushed away? The father was still ill, but the son didn't hesitate in taking a key. If a normal person acted this way, it would have been a cause for castigation by others. It was true that Rui Wang shouldn't have acted this way. The emperor was worried about his matter, yet he himself had no qualms about taking a key. That heart of his was really broad, and as a son, his conduct was truly unfilial. Because the emperor favored him, no one dared to openly criticize him. Consequently, it fell on him, as the commander of the Imperial Guard, to think of ways to protect Rui Wang. Otherwise, he wouldn't know how to explain the situation to the emperor. After earnestly thinking about it, Commander Sun could only give a bark of laughter. Whatever Wang Ye says. He was only a little commander of the Imperial Guards. How can he afford to play word games with the higher-up Wang Ye? Ha! He Qi smiled, turned his horse and trotted away. At Rui Wangfu, Qin Bai Lu was standing near the gate of drooping flowers, watching the blue sedan being carried into the Xice Yuan. Her face dark, she said to the Yawan behind her, in the end, Wang Ye really did take her in. The Yawan comforted her. Wang Fei, Chu Shi is only a Shi who will not be written into the genealogy book. You don't have to worry about that kind of person. Don't worry. Qin Bai Lu smiled icily. If she was only a normal person, why did Wang Ye go to the Lantern Festival with her? She had fought and vented, but in the end, Wang Ye was still the same and acted even colder to her. At that time, she knew that to Wang Ye, she was no different from any other woman in this fu. Qin Bailu's expression became bitter just thinking about it. She had been proud for so many years. Only after she'd married, did she realize a certain man could crush her pride into the ground and grind it to dust. However noble she was as a daughter of the Qin family, how could it ever compare to the status of an imperial son? Chu Yusu, who was currently being hated and envied by Qin Bai Lu, wasn't as well off as the other had imagined. She sat on the bed and looked at the pink bed curtains and blankets. The only thing that was red in color was a pair of burning candles. There were no matrons of honor, no lotuses or peanuts, no red head dresses, not even the exchange of the wine cups. The surroundings were silent. The only people present in the yard were the 2 Yawan of the Wang Fu who stood guard outside and the Yawan who had accompanied her into the room. Yao Xi saw her Ziyaja's face didn't look healthy. She said in a small voice, "Ziyaja, Newbie heard that Wang Ye had set up a few tables in celebration today. He must not have left yet." Knowing that Yao Xi was trying to comfort her, she smiled bitterly and said, "I'm just a Fei. Would anyone of significant status come to such a banquet? With Rui Wang's status, would he be willing to personally receive those who didn't have a prominent status?" She had chosen this road. Whatever ending she got, she asked for it. Chapter 54 Losing the Heart of the Emperor. "Wang Ye, be careful where you step," said the Yawan holding the lantern in a gentle voice. "Not many people come to Xiceuan. The road isn't easy to walk on." He Yuan smiled at the Yawan until the other bashfully buried her head lower and lower. He finally spoke, "If that's so, then the lantern needs to be raised higher." The Yawan's face turned red and the lantern in her hand swayed before she recovered her composure. Originally, no one had lived in Xiceuan. Because a Fei was soon to be taken in, the chief steward of the Wang Fu told the servants to clean it. The majority of the furniture had not been renewed before Chu Yusu's imminent arrival. The procession entered Xiceuan. Inside, the lights shone brightly, but He Yuan didn't have the innate joy that sprang from taking a beautiful woman as a she. He looked at the tightly closed door, and then at the 2 kneeling Yawan who were safeguarding it. In a heavy voice, he said, "Open the door." "Yes," one of the Yawan bowed and gently pushed open the door. He Yuan stepped inside and passed the shelf of many treasures to see Chu Yusu sitting on the bed. She was wearing a light-colored girdled dress. The girdle was pale green in color. Her head was bowed, revealing a pale neck. She did seem to have some beauty. He Yuan stood next to the shelf and motioned for everyone inside to leave before slowly moving forward. "Wang Ye," Chu Yusu stood and bowed. Her movements were graceful and subtle, acting more like a daughter of an educated and noble family than his own Wang Fei, Qin Shi. Was beauty waiting for Ben Wang? He Yuan raised her chin with his index finger, his thumb curling at her lip. "Each minute of the spring night is worth 1,000 gold pieces. We shouldn't waste any more time." He didn't wait to hear Chu Yusu's thoughts before pushing her onto the bed. The piercing pain erupting in the lower half of her body made Chu Yusu spill hot tears. She'd never thought that her wedding night would end up like this, painful and without a shred of warmth. She hadn't even heard a gentle word from the man lying on top of her body. To this man, she was probably just a plaything. The pain slowly dulled into numbness. She stared wide-eyed at the lotus flowers embroidered on the pink curtains above her head. She wouldn't always be in this position. Chu Qingju had achieved a good life, so why couldn't she? What Chu Qingju could do, she could do also. When Chu Qingju first heard that the Duke of Changde had put Chu Yusu in a blue sedan and sent her off to Rui Wangfu, she was sitting in Zhengyuan listening to the flattery of the Qishi. When she had finished listening to what had happened, she sighed ruefully, "Such a pity. She might not like Chu Yusu personally, but to send a 15-year-old girl away to be a Qi? It really was a waste of her talent and beauty." Her entire life had been ruined because she had a mother like Liang Shi. The Qishi sitting below her didn't know what to say in response. They knew that Wang Fei didn't have a good relationship with her maternal family. Her half-sister rushing off to become a Qi of Rui Wang wasn't some glorious event. Should they be outwardly happy that a person Wang Fei disliked became someone's Qi, or sad because Wang Fei's sister had shamed her? Zhang Yongyu glanced at Wang Fei and saw she wasn't angry, yet she wasn't happy. She looked regretful. Zhang Yongyu's thoughts switched tracks and she said, "Qi heard that Chu San Ziyaja is talented and beautiful. No wonder His Highness Rui Wang would fall in love with her." He Yuan was the type of person who saw women as just playthings in his heart. There was no such thing as love in his mind. She smiled helplessly. If it was like that, then this match would have been good. Some people want to be a Qi. Who can stop them? Ping Ziijin smiled mirthlessly as she spoke, momentarily forgetting that she too was a Qi. Chu Qingju glanced at her. She felt too lazy to argue and lightly remarked, Ping Shiki should think about her own identity before speaking. She then told the Shiki to leave. When Ping Ziijin came out of the Zheng Yuan, her face still hadn't recovered. Now that she had been demoted from Ce Fei to Shiki, the people who had fawned over her in the past were nowhere to be seen. Even the other Shiki beside her didn't want to talk to her. She hated seeing the disdain Chu Qingju had towards her, but she was helpless. She had no favor and no status. If Chu Qingju wanted to move against her, it would take only a few words. What could she do in return? The news that He Yuan took a key quickly spread throughout Jing city. The imperial censors who had already been opposing him redoubled their efforts to impeach him. It seemed as though they would not rest without defeating He Yuan. Even Qingde Emperor was angry this time and summoned He Yuan to the palace. He looked at his child kneeling in front of him with a bowed head and thought about his adorableness when he first learned how to talk and walk. His heart softened in an instant. Using a handkerchief to muffle the sound of coughing, he asked a few seconds later, Zhen thought you were young and inexperienced, so Zhen tolerated you at every turn. Who knew that you would commit a thoughtless action? Do you not know the discontent that the entire court feels towards you? Chen only took a woman. It has nothing to do with them. He Yuan raised his head to look at Qingde Emperor. Fu Huang, these people are purposefully attacking Chen. No matter what Chen does, they will always find an excuse to make things difficult for Chen. There's no difference whether or not Chen actually committed it. Qingde Emperor saw He Yuan's face had turned slightly red with anger. He coughed several more times before asking, how could the entire court be deliberately opposing you? Yuaner, you are not small anymore. Think before you act. Even Zhen cannot do whatever Zhen pleases. He Yuan's face darkened but didn't say a word. Zhen knows you have a fiery personality. All these years, there hasn't been any criticism. Zhen only thought that after you grew up, you would understand and change. But after seeing your conduct becoming even more outrageous, Zhen hurts inside. He gave a sigh, stay in your fu and reflect. If you do such things again, even Zhen cannot protect you. Fu Huang is the son of heaven, the master of all the people in the world. Do you have to consider other people? He Yuan looked at Qingde Emperor and asked with a hint of defiance, the entire world is yours. Why do you have to take their opinions into consideration? Qingde Emperor looked at his most beloved son. A beat later, he said, you shall go back and reflect. Leave now. Chen asks for leave. He Yuan saw Qingde Emperor's expression wasn't good, and could only bow and leave. Coming out of Tianqi Palace, his face became progressively angrier. If he was the emperor, he would control all the power. He didn't need anyone ordering him about. If they didn't want their position, there would be hundreds of thousands of people who did. He wouldn't get threatened because of these matters. After all these years, Fu Huang's personality was still soft, so he allowed the people in the royal court to push him around. Yo, Sandi is leaving the palace. He Qi had a smile on his face as he strode towards He Yuan. Seeing the ugly expression on He Yuan's face, his smile became even brighter. I heard that in 2 days, Sid is being transported back to Jing for his recovery. What does Sandi think? Whatever De Ge thinks, I will also think. He Yuan raised his chin, his eyes full of disdain as he looked at He Qi. Did you think that you could jump up in order to push me down so you could climb even higher? Dream on. A scornful smile appeared on his face. He Qi didn't become angry. He only came up and patted He Yuan's shoulder. He lowered his voice and said, to climb up or not is not important. If Sandi falls down, Wei Xian would be even happier. He straightened and said with a smile, that year, Sandi and this brother were playing together. Sandi tripped and caused Ben Wang and Mufei to kneel at Zhao Xiang Palace for an entire night. Don't forget it. We all rely on our abilities. If De Ji and Wen Giban had the ability, why would you ask for mercy in front of the doors of Didi and Mufiai's palace? He Yuan raised his lips in a smile. Of course I wouldn't forget such a matter. It was such a good show in the past. He Qi's smile became darker. He stared icily at He Yuan. Pray towards the heavens that you would see an entire lifetime of good shows. De Ji doesn't have to worry about that. He Yuan raised an eyebrow and looked towards the palace gates. Farewell. He Qi watched expressionlessly as He Yuan left the palace and a thin sliver of icy mirth appeared on his face. Arrogant people died quickly. He wondered if the other would be as arrogant at the time of his death. Around the corner, He Hung smiled as he saw his two brothers part ways. He turned and said to Ming He behind him, Ben Wang's De Ji and San Du have such good relations. To have harmony between sons of the imperial family, it is a lucky event. Ming He responded with a smile. Of course it is a lucky event. He Hung rubbed his chin as he smiled. Remembering that Lao Si was coming back to Jing in 2 days, he ordered, after returning to the Fu, remember to let Wang Fei prepare some healing and blood-enriching medicines. Ming He acknowledged the words with a bow of his head, realizing that Wang Ye was preparing it for Cheng Wang. He said, Wang Ye doesn't have to worry. Nikkei remembers that the Fu's stores has many rare blood-enriching medicines. Cheng Wang will certainly recover quickly. He Hung nodded. He turned and went inside the carriage to return home. At the Fu, he walked towards the Zheng Yuan to eat the evening meal as was his custom. As he entered the main gate of Zheng Yuan, he detected the distinct smell of medicine. When he looked around and saw the Zhenjai Yuan's servants moving back and forth as they sorted out the medicines. It was a busy scene. When the servants saw him, they stopped what they were doing and bowed in greeting. No need to bow, just perform your duties. He Hung went inside the room to see Chu Qingju writing, her head bent. As he moved closer, he saw that she was writing several lists of medicines. All of them seemed to contain good items that would help improve a person's health. Wang Ye has returned. Chu Qingju raised her head to glance at him before returning to her writing, not even bothering to stand for greeting. This is all in preparation for Sid. He Hung glanced a few more times at her characters that were only neat, not beautiful. We have a good variety here. There are only 2 months left before the wedding of Si Shu and the girl from the Luo family is held. Chu Qingju put down her pen and scanned the list before saying, originally, Si Shu returning home victoriously in his upcoming marriage was a cause for celebration. Who knew that villains would try to assassinate him? Thankfully, he is in no mortal danger, but what good is that if he doesn't have a healthy body? He Hung just realized that the date of marriage was almost here and the spring examinations were also about to begin. When Fu Huang had sent Sid to investigate the case, did he think of Sid's impending nuptials? Maybe he did think about it, maybe he didn't. But he was certain of one thing, for He Yuan, Fu Huang could overlook anything. Chapter 55 Fortune and Misfortune. Chu Qingju didn't know what kind of feelings He Hung had towards He Ming as his diddy, but she felt that it wasn't to the point of indifference. Chu Qingju was only certain that his desire to see He Ming recover and regain a healthy body seemed sincere. The items on her list weren't extremely rare, but they were certainly valuable and definitely suitable for He Ming's consumption. She placed the paper aside to dry before standing up. After 2 more days, Si Shu will be back in Jing. Wang Ye shouldn't worry too much. I remember, when I was younger and living in the palace, I used to play with Sid for a long time. But when the schoolwork started increasing, our interactions gradually lessened. He Hung started to reminiscence about the past. Even though he was not as important as He Yuan in Fu Huang's eyes, He Hung was still treated much better compared to He Qi. Out of his 4 brothers, the most neglected one was He Ming. As we grew up over the years, the feelings have diminished, but we're still brothers, so there is some lingering camaraderie. Back then, right after Sid had been born, it wasn't known what Shu Guifei had said to Fu Huang which made him start to neglect Sid and Sid's birth mother. No other imperial children were born after that. Perhaps his romantic of a father had promised something to Shu Guifei. But whatever had happened between his father and Shu Guifei wasn't that important to He Hung. He Hung didn't really have much thoughts and feelings towards his Fuhuang. He was just a silly man. Otherwise, the Delong dynasty wouldn't be currently showing slight signs of decay instead of prosperity. Chu Qingju saw that He Heng's face held disdain. She stared for a beat and then understood. No one would be happy to have a father who treated his children like the emperor did. The feelings between two people in childhood are probably the purest. Qingju's words hit me at my heart. He Hung smiled but didn't want to discuss what occurred in the past. He remarked, Lao San added a shi to his fu. It's not some major event, but our fu should send a gift. Lao San had been quite sneaky, and hadn't properly notified his brothers. But as his gag, it was only proper that he paid attention. Chu Qingju felt that He Hung didn't have any good intentions. Clearly, the emperor had already expressed dissatisfaction towards He Yuan for taking a key. But he just had to say it was a happy occasion. Was it really good to stick a knife in his brother like this? The day after he took the key, I had someone deliver a gift. Thinking about how she felt when the news first reached her ears, Chu Qingju couldn't resist sighing, my maternal family is becoming more and more unpresentable. A noble daughter of a duke going to become a fei of a Wangfu, and it wasn't even because someone in the palace had made the match. It's such a laughing stock. Why worry over such minor things? You are my wife, therefore you are of my Duan Wangfu. How Chong de Gongfu acts has no connection to you. Assuming that Chu Qingju would feel bad because of such a thing, He Hung reiterated his thoughts, you are you, Chong de Gongfu is Chong de Gongfu, I won't confuse the two. Chu Qingju saw his face was serious and understood that his words were mostly sincere. At least, he seemed genuine at this moment. And if his attitude somehow changed in the future, well, that wasn't something she could control. Wang Ye treats me well, I know. Leaning her head on Acthi's shoulder to disguise the calm in her eyes, like I said before, being able to marry Wang Ye was my good fortune. The women who married He Hung and He Ming would be slightly more fortunate than the other two He brothers. He Qi wife would be forced to become an obedient steward. Marrying He Yuan would most likely be the biggest challenge in any woman's life. Disregarding the fact that He Ming had an honest and generous personality, He Hung might have a deep and complicated mind, but he didn't have that attitude of He Yuan where he used the bottom of his foot to look at women. This was a lucky happenstance of her time travel. Gently patting the back of the person in his embrace, He Hung felt an unspeakable joy in his heart. It wasn't that he had never seen beautiful women before, and this woman certainly wasn't the most beautiful woman, but he felt that she was a perfect fit for him. Even with her small temper and occasional cheating at Wiki, in his eyes, that was extremely attractive. Suddenly thinking of the phrase beauty is in the eye of the beholder, He Hung couldn't help but smile. No one would believe it, and even he was surprised that a man like him could feel that rarest feeling of them all for a certain woman. If he really did fall in love, then wouldn't everyone else in the world be romantics? Maybe it was only because that he felt she was good and thus she appeared beautiful in every way. Maybe after some time, she wouldn't be any different from the other women in the Fu. Loosening his grasp of the woman he embraced, He Hung raised his hand to pinch at her soft earlobe. After Sid returns to Jing, I'll take you to that estate in the suburbs to soak in the hot springs. Chu Qingju gave a smile, that will be wonderful. After a few more days, the apricot, peach, and pear flowers will have all bloomed. We could go sightseeing outside the Fu. All right, we'll have them prepare some barbecue. It will be a picnic. He Hung didn't blindly follow the rules. During his leisure time, he enjoyed his life. When Chu Qingju mentioned the blooming flowers, he immediately thought of a picnic. That's a good idea. Chu Qingju clapped her hands. Hot springs, barbecue, flowers. It would be a great experience. He Hung saw her face was full of joy and couldn't help but laugh. Standing guard outside, Ming He, Mu Jin and the others heard the laughter and chatter inside and relaxed in response. As servants, if their owners were happy, their lives became easier. At this time, He Yuan had returned to his fu, and saw Qin Bai Lu sitting with a crowd of Yawan and Mama in the garden. His concubines were also kneeling on the ground, including the one he had recently taken, Chu Shi. His mood hadn't lifted and his face became even darker after taking in the scene. He stared coldly at Qin Bai Shuang. Wang Fei, why have you made all these shiki kneel here and obstruct Ben Wang's path? The expressions of Qin Bai Lu and the concubines instantly changed. The former because she had just been publicly humiliated, the latter because of the uncaring attitude Wang Ye showed towards them. The gardens became silent. Get lost! What are you all kneeling here for? If you really want to block Ben Wang's path, why don't you all go kneel at the main gate? He Yuan kicked aside the manservant kneeling nearby. He pointed at Qin Bai Lu and berated her. This was a good Wang Fu. Look at what you have done to it. Ben Wang gets bothered just looking at it. Qin Bai Lu knew that Wang Ye may have been reprimanded by the emperor at the palace. Chu Shi was the one who caused all this trouble, but he raged at her instead. Her heart felt ill just thinking of it. She lowered her head to glare at Chu Yusa standing close by. Barely suppressing the rage inside, she said in a somewhat gentle tone, Wang Ye doesn't have to get so angry. You were just taking a key. Fu Huang certainly wouldn't be angry at you because of that. Are you allowed to surmise Fu Huang's thoughts? He Yuan's face darkened. As He Yuan thought about Fu Huang's eyes when he had admonished him, he felt that his own rage was unsightly. Turning, he saw Chu Shi standing submissively on the sidelines and said, Chu Shi, come with Ben Wang. Everyone else scatter. Qin Bai Lu ground her teeth as she watched Wang Ye lead that slut Chu Shi away. She could only hatefully point at the other concubines and scold harshly, you can't even serve Wang Ye well. What's the use in keeping all of you here? Leave. The shiki who became Wang Fei's punching bag hastily retreated. They hated how unkind Wang Fei was and also hated Chu Shi for her trickery. These days, Wang Ye was constantly spending the night at Chu Shi's place. Was there any room for them to survive? Chu Yusa wasn't being tenderly loved like they all imagined. He Yuan's actions against her were brutal and merciless. To him, she was nothing more than a plaything, something used to vent his anger and desires on. He loved tormenting her, but she couldn't speak of it. Every morning when she woke up, she looked at the bruises on her body and then at the valuable items He Yuan bestowed upon her. She felt both humiliated and resentful. She hated the heavens for being unfair and He Yuan for his cruelty. After suffering through another round of He Yuan's venting, he stood up and left, leaving her to lie alone on the spacious bed. For some strange reason, Chu Yusa thought of Chu Qingju as she heard Yao Xi murmuring and sobbing. What was she doing now? Was she sleeping in an embrace with Duan Wang or sleeping soundly alone in a soft large bed? Zuzi, newbie will get you a bath. Yao Xi looked at her mistress, her face looking vacant as if she had lost her soul. Her voice rose in pitch as she repeated her words, Zuzi, newbie will get you a bath. Yao Xi, what do you think Daji is doing right now? Chu Yusa woodenly stood up and allowed Yao Xi to support her into the bathtub. Yao Xi stilled and she responded a beat later, it's late now. She is probably preparing to sleep. Yes, sleep. Chu Yusa raised a hand to cover her face and laughed loudly. Chu Qingju let the servants put away the qi board and insatiably said to He Hung, Wang Ye, don't you think that my wiki skills have improved a lot? He Hang's expression faltered briefly, improved a lot. It's all due to Wang Yi's efforts. Chu Qingju walked up to him and kissed his cheek, then, we'll continue to play next time. He Hung touched the spot she'd kissed before picking her up and carrying her to the bed. Qingju makes me happy. I will certainly make Qingju satisfied in return. Chu Qingju twisted her waist, indicating his words were too perverted. As a woman with proper upbringing, she expressed her embarrassment of his words. And then she reached out to pull at his belt and looked up at him with a clueless face, what happy and satisfied. If anyone could still resist at that point, then they weren't a man. He hung pressed down on the person underneath him. The yun brocade robe on Chu Qingju's body was pulled off, the underrobe was heartlessly torn off. When pulled by his big hand, the chest covering embroidered with peach blossoms easily fell off. Chu Qingju raised her left hand to cover her chest, her right hand pulling the other's lapel, trying to express her hope to share in good fortunes and in nakedness. Men were always skilled at undressing, especially on the bed. When the two of them nakedly started moving, Chu Qingju thought that it was delusional to think that He Hung was becoming more enthusiastic of late. In the end, Chu Qingju was carried by He Hung to the bathtub. As was their usual custom, they mutually washed each other, He Hung groping her occasionally. After putting on their clothes, she pouted for He Hung to carry her back to bed. Her reason was that her endurance had all been used up. So He Hung was most willing to carry her, his face blooming with pleasure. Chapter 56 Schemes of Brothers. On the day He Ming returned to Jing, the city was enveloped in a light rain. He was half lying inside the carriage, listening to the sound of rain outside. His face looked pale as he lifted up the curtain. He smiled indifferently as he saw the city gate looming closer. As the carriage drew up near the gate, he saw Ge and Erge sitting astride on their horses. Behind them, several officials stood nearby, waiting to welcome him back to Jing. He motioned for the carriage to stop and moved to step out. "Sid is wounded, don't get up," He Hung rode his horse forward, smiling as he prevented He Ming from coming down to bow. He dismounted, cupping one hand over his other fisted hand. "Sid has suffered this time. Erge's words are an exaggeration. I failed in accomplishing the duty Fu Huang asked of me. I'm extremely embarrassed, nonetheless." He Ming still made a bow in front of the carriage. His face had an expression of shame. To hear that Fu Huang is worried about it makes Chen unfilial. You were fulfilling your duty. It was the bad intentions of others that ruined the mission. What does that have to do with you? He Hung smiled. Fu Huang requested that De Ge and I receive you before returning to the palace to report. "Sid, you can rest your heart. Thanks De Ge, Erge." He Ming made a bow towards He Qi before sitting back properly inside the carriage. The driver carefully put the curtain down and waited for Ning Wang and Duan Wang to move first. He Hung got on his horse and moved towards the still mounted He Qi. He looked at the carriage waiting behind him and said to He Qi, "De Ge, we should go." He Qi nodded and remarked as if he was both concerned and relieved, "Sid looks much thinner. He must have had a hard time on the road." He Hung nodded in agreement. He switched topics. After a few more days, the examinations start. When the spring examinations end, it would be Sid's big day. At that time, us brothers should have a good celebration. Naturally, we will celebrate. He Qi gave a bright laugh, and fell silent for the rest of the journey. When He Ming went to see Qingde Emperor, he was given some medicine before he left Tianqi Palace. Nguipan shed many tears when she saw He Ming appear in front of her. After listening to his Mufei narrate the events that recently occurred in Jing City, He Ming smiled as he assured her, "Mufei no longer needs to worry. This is a good thing. At least Chen could close the fu by using my recovery as an excuse. That way, I would not be drawn into their business." Nguipan heard this and her face suddenly changed. "Ming did you?" Checking that no one else was in the room, He Ming lowered his voice. "Those assassins seemed to have no intentions of harming Chen. They were only targeting Right Minister Wei. Chen's wounds may look dangerous but they didn't hit any critical parts. So Mufei doesn't have to worry too much." Nguipan wiped away her tears as she hatefully declared, "He Qi and He Yuan are intolerable. They can fight for the throne all they want but why do they have to involve my son? Those two, one is the oldest, the other is the most favored. Naturally, neither will care about other people." He Ming gave a bitter smile. "Mufei shouldn't get angry over these matters." Nguipan barely managed to suppress her anger. She was not usually favored. After she had given birth, Shu Guifei had kept on bullying her. Thankfully, the Empress was fair and just. Otherwise, her days would have been even more difficult to endure. She sighed, "It's Mufei that's useless. If Mufei was more favored, you wouldn't have been so neglected." She suddenly thought of Jing Guifei. Even though Jing Guifei wasn't as favored as Shu Guifei, she still had some standing in the emperor's heart. Her son, He Hung, was second in terms of favor, right behind He Yuan. She had never interacted with him, but he seemed to be a very able person. She thought out loud, He Hung might not be an open and honest person, but Mufei thinks that this person isn't as cold-blooded and ruthless. If you interact with him more frequently, a good friendship could grow between brothers. He Ming understood what his Mufei meant. He paused for a beat before replying, "Mufei doesn't have to worry, Chen will consider this matter thoroughly." If He Yuan or He Qi succeeded the throne, it was likely that his days would become even more difficult. If He Hung succeeded, even though he was a sanctimonious person, he wouldn't slight him since he was just an unthreatening younger brother. To show the love between brothers, He Hung would even treat him well. He Ming didn't want to fight, but he didn't want to be a sword that a person used and threw away. He could choose a wise master and plan for the rest of his life. He Hang's wife Chu Shi is extremely close to the Luo family. When you left Jing City, Chu Shi had sent people to deliver stuff to me. Jing Guifei was very attentive to me as well, and Guipin was a woman inclined to an ordinary life, but she wouldn't allow others to harm her child. No matter what ideas they have, at least their execution is much better looking than the other two. He Ming knew deep down that He Yuan and He Qi hadn't even properly looked at him. It was only Erge with whom he had camaraderie from all those times they playing together as children. It might have faded much over the years, but he still treated him much better than the other two, and he remembered the good turns he had been given. He sat down on the step carriage, provided specially to him by the order of Fu Huang, and left the palace. Soon after He Ming returned to his fu, he received the gifts sent by the other families. Even De Ji and San Ji had sent something over. Although their presents were only decorations that looked valuable but were practically useless, at least they had showed some concern. The presents that Erge's fu had sent had been identified by his own fu's doctor as restoratives that were good for the body. He Ming started to understand the concern Erge felt for him. Remembering how Fu Huang subtly hinted that he should ignore the officials who believed San Ji was behind the assassination attempt, the smile on He Ming's face became colder. Since Fu Huang wanted him to believe him, naturally he wouldn't make Fu Huang disappointed. As to whether or not anyone would trust his actions, that would depend on Fu Huang and San Ji. Paternal love. He Ming threw the sandalwood bead bracelet that Qingde Emperor had given him onto the floor. He watched as the beads bounced in every direction. He sneered as he spoke aloud, "It's such a joke." On the first day of the spring examinations, the carriages filled the areas outside the examination halls, all of them waiting to deliver the student scholars. Liang Rong and Chu Wangji sat inside a tea tower, watching as the flood of students lined up to enter the examination hall. The two felt their faces turn bitter. Both of them were students of the Eastern Mountain Academy. Because the academy was on holiday today, they came specially to look at the examination hall. They felt some pressure thinking about how they would also be entering this place soon. Chu Wangji was particularly tense, since he would be entering the exam hall in the fall. He looked at the stern examinees underneath and felt that he couldn't breathe. "Biao Xiang, there's not much to see here, let's leave." The exam had only been going on for 4 or 6 hours when a few white-haired examinees had been carried out. Chu Wangji's expression became uglier as he stood to leave. That Chu Fu, didn't it have a Wang Fei? Why did they send their little daughter off to be a key? Who knows? I just heard that little daughter was a child of the second wife. This second wife was only of a declining family. Duan Wang Fei was born from the original duchess. Do you know who she is? Who is she? Do you know the Marquis of Xiangqing, Tiandaran of the Supreme Court? That famous person, who hasn't heard of him? I heard that no matter how difficult the case could be, if it was delivered to the courts, it will be thoroughly investigated. Yes, that's the one. Duan Wangfei's birth mother was the Marquis of Xiangqing's full-blooded Jija. How can you say that their education and birth were the same? The fact that one became a Wangfei and the other becoming a concubine, isn't that normal? Chu Wangji's face became ghastly as he overheard the conversation. He wanted to rush down and argue with the people downstairs, but Liang Rong stopped him. Wangji, this is the entrance to the examination hall. It would not be good for you if you start something. But to let them keep discussing my family like this. Chu Wangji's rage didn't dissipate, but he didn't insist on rushing down. If the matter became public, it might affect him later on if he went into politics. Liang Rong looked at the surroundings before lowering his voice to advise, right now, they are just having a good time. You have to know, the most favored right now is His Highness Rui Wang. Biao Mei has gone into Rui Wangfu to be a Ce Fei. In the future, she would. He raised a thumb at Chu Wangji, the meaning evident. Chu Wangji gritted his teeth and kept a lid on his anger. The two came down the tea tower. After traveling for a while on their horses, they saw a grandiose procession heading towards them. The leading guards were all stocky and tough-looking, their eyes alert. From a glance, it could be seen that these were the type of guards which could never be owned by normal families. The carriage behind was pulled by 8 stallions. Bells attached to the sandalwood carriage rang merrily as it moved forward. The two could only yield the right of way. When the carriage came closer, they saw that the carriage was imprinted with the symbol of Duan Wangfu. Chu Wangji's face darkened, but he could only helplessly lower his head to show his respect to the Wangfu. After Duan Wangfu's carriage traveled further ahead, the two continued to proceed. Liang Rong asked with some confusion, "That's the direction heading out of the city. Duan Wangfu is taking this many carriages, I wonder where they are going. Was the family of Duan Wang really heading out to relax at this important time? Who knows what these Wang Ye want to do?" Chu Wangji's tone wasn't friendly. He turned to look in the direction the Duan Wangfu carriages took. He paused before noting, "I heard that Duan Wang Ye had a hot spring estate in the suburbs. The flowers bloom early on that mountain. They must be going sightseeing." Chu Wangji was born to a duke and knew more than Liang Rong. He was pretty clear and knowledgeable about the more important properties the Wang Ye and Jing owned in the suburbs of the city. Going out to play. Right now, the wounded Right Minister Wei and Cheng Wang had both returned to Jing after the attempted assassination. Ning Wang and Rui Wang were engaged in a white-hot battle, and Duan Wang had the leisure to go on holiday. Liang Rong felt his head wasn't able to process it at all. At this time, wasn't he supposed to take advantage? What did avoiding it mean? The play was going to start, but Duan Wang had done such an action. How would the Darren engaged in conflict at Jing endure? Inside the carriage, Chu Qingju, her hair in a simple hairstyle, leaned on the soft cushions as she asked, "Wang Ye is really leaving Jing like this?" He smiled calmly at her, "Didn't Qingju want to soak in the hot springs? The weather is just perfect." Chu Qingju giggled, turning to burrow into his embrace, "Wang Ye treats me so well." Her words sounded so fake to He Heng's ears. He smiled helplessly as he explained, "At this time, Jing City would certainly fall into a storm because of SID and the rankings from the spring examinations. Ben Wang isn't interested in these things. It's better to stay away and find some peace." Chu Qingju looked at his face, and strangely, on his face, the words two-faced were written there. Ha! Did he really believe she never heard the story of the mantis stalking the locust, unaware of the aureole behind it? This is a very famous Chinese idiom. The general gist is that the players are all focus on who they want to defeat, to the point they cannot see the enemy behind them. Chapter 57 Husband and wife on a trip together. The hot springs in the Jing suburbs were located not too far from the city. Chu Qingju saw that the nameplate of Manor's front gate had Fulang Manor written on it. Releasing the curtains, she commented to He Heng sitting beside her, this name is popular and literary. The meaning is very good. N. This property was bequeathed by Fu Huang, and Mufei named it. He Hung tilted his head to smile. After entering this gate, we would be traveling for quite a while before reaching our residence. There are many crops planted here. Some off-season fruits and vegetables can only be grown near the springs. Much of our food's fruits come from this manor. The intelligence of the ancients were, as expected, endless. They didn't have any plastic tarps or greenhouses to plant vegetables. Instead, they used the aid of nature to grow the food that shouldn't be in season. And their produce were a lot more natural compared to those that grew in the greenhouses. There's a patch of peach and pear blossoms blooming right now on the mountain. After we rest today, I'll accompany you there tomorrow. He Hung saw her face was full of admiration and his smile became more visible. Baiyun Mountain is very close by. If we have the time, we should go see the Five Estates Monastery at the peak. Baiyun Mountain Five Estates Monastery? Chu Qingju felt the name sounded familiar but couldn't recall where she had heard it. It probably wasn't anything important. Otherwise, she would have remembered it. She didn't think about it any further and raised the curtain occasionally to look at the scenery. The road had been constructed well. It was completely paved with black stone. Large trees were planted beside the road. To her left, some sections of the field were planted with wheat and all kinds of vegetables behind the trees. To her right were several fruit trees. The surroundings didn't look very symmetrical, but Chu Qingju didn't have an obsessive-compulsive disorder, so she thought it looked rather interesting. After traveling for a while, the carriage stopped. Chu Qingju heard a voice speaking just outside the carriage. This humble person Zhang Hong greets Wang Yat, Wang Fei. Chu Qingju stilled for a beat before she understood. This Zhang Hong was most likely the chief steward of this manor. No wonder he had come out to welcome them in the middle of the road. She looked at He Hung and saw the other seemed to think it was normal behavior. Steward Zhang doesn't have to be so courteous. Has everything in the manor been prepared? Qian Chong Xin smiled insincerely at Zhang Hong as he could see the other's desire to curry favor. Today marks the first time Wang Fei has come to this estate. If you serve them well, naturally there will be rewards. If a mistake occurs, you yourself will receive the punishment. Don't worry, Chief Steward Jian. Us humble people will serve well, and wouldn't be remiss in any way. Zhang Hong didn't expect Wang Yet or Wang Fei to pay any attention to him. He smiled as he retreated to join the other stewards. Hot water and food have already been prepared on the mountain. It cannot compare to the food, but it wins at having more of a wild taste. Wang Yet and Wang Fei can taste something new. Smart. Coming out here at this time, it's good to eat something fresh. Qian Chong Xin spoke quietly and gave Zhang Hong an appreciative glance before he waved his hand for the procession to move ahead. As they watched the train of carriages depart, the steward behind Zhang Hong asked, "Chief Steward Zhang, what should we do now?" "Do now? Hurry and keep up. If any of the people down there do something wrong, we will all be affected." Zhang Hong's fawning manner instantly disappeared and he glared at the speaker. He started chasing after the carriages. The other stewards stared at each other. Wang Ye didn't usually come to the manor. They didn't know the preferences of Wang Ye and Wang Fei. But seeing how tense the chief steward was, they also started running. After the carriage had stopped for the second time, Chu Qingju finally saw the gate of the main building on the property. The building wasn't as grand as the Wang Fu, but it had its own sense of style. It was very exquisite, especially the three-level tower located behind it. Chu Qingju couldn't help but look at it more closely. If you like the Jade Cloud Tower, we could live in there for the next few days. He Hung smiled as he suggested, beside Jade Cloud Tower is the Hot Springs Pavilion. A white jade pool has been constructed there. It's very easy to soak in there. Chu Qingju nodded, great. A better view of the scenery can be seen from the top of the tower. After hearing that Wang Fei and Wang Ye wished to live in Jade Cloud Tower, the servants moved everything over. They lit the fragrances, the copper beast stoves and other things in order to heat up the buildings so that their owners would be warm and happy. Chu Qingju let He Hung accompany her as she walked around the main building of the estate. She found that the carvings and the halls of this estate were finely crafted and held hints of the construction style of Zhongnan. She even saw a hot stream winding its way through the property. It must have been constructed using the water from the hot springs. Chu Qingju felt that the hot springs that called themselves emperor-level treatment in her previous life were just weaklings compared to what was before her eyes. Look at this hot spring estate that a Wang Ye had. If it was like this, how much grander would the emperor's one be? This property is slightly small, but it is very exquisite. It's fine to come out here occasionally. He Hung didn't have much interest in the flora and fauna of the estate. He held Chu Qingju's hand and walked slowly towards Jade Cloud Tower. Over the years, I've only come here once or twice and I haven't had the chance to take a good look around the place. Then Wang Ye has to stay here with me and play for a few days. Even though Chu Qingju knew he had no intention of interfering with court matters, she still added, it's just that this is very far for Wang Ye to go to court. He Hung smiled, that's fine. I don't have many matters to deal with nowadays. After I attend court, I'll come back here to keep you company. As he thought of the prearranged events in Jing City, the smile on his face dimmed. I'll also use the carriage. Even if I have to wake up earlier than usual, I could nap inside whilst traveling. Chu Qingju laughed at him for being lazy and He Hung pinched her cheek in retaliation. The two held hands as they played the entire way. The servants passing by all lowered their heads, not daring to look at their faces directly. After the noon meal, the two took a nap before rising and prepared to take a walk outside. Chu Qingju sat in front of the mirror and watched Yuzhan familiarly style her hair. She ordered, these days, you don't need to take as much care with the hair ornaments. Over here, there's no need to show my status. Yuzhan nodded in response. She picked up the hairpins for Chu Qingju and chose a pale yellow short dress for her to wear. Chu Qingju tilted her head as she looked at herself in the mirror. There was a hint of the style of the women of Zhongnan. She smiled and complimented, Yuzhan's hands are so clever. As she spoke, she rewarded each of the 4 Dayawan who'd accompanied her when she married with a pearl-encrusted hairpin. He Hung also finished dressing at the same time. Seeing Chu Qingju's light and clean appearance, he commented, Qingju is beautiful in whatever you wear, as expected. As expected? Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow. Wang Ye is always unusually handsome in anything he wears. He Hung was wearing a moon-colored long robe. He did seem to have some of the looks needed to attract women. She came forward and tickled his palm, I can't look away. Wasn't he supposed to say that to her? He Hung smiled helplessly. He took her hand and said, let's go. The rain has stopped. We can take a look at the back of the mountain. The entire mountain they were situated on belonged to He Hung. Chu Qingju had the feeling that she was investigating her husband's assets. She and He Hung got on the step carriage together. They looked at the grasses and trees on both sides. After they reached the back of the mountain, she pointed at the small waterfall that had formed when the water on the mountain first flowed down and exclaimed, this is like a drawing. A green mountain, a thin mist, and the pink peach blossoms blooming in the trees. Chu Qingju was moved. No wonder the main male lead in the novels liked to use the scenery to chase after their beauty. Because looking at beautiful scenery made people happy. Even though Chu Qingju had been part of the entertainment circle for a long time, she was still dazed by the scenery before her. But Chu Qingju's happy mood didn't stay for long because an incident occurred. Wang Ye. This voice was so deeply tragic that a person's heart would break upon hearing it. She looked behind her and saw Yunqing wearing a slightly faded cotton dress and standing on a rock slightly behind them. Chu Qingju was even able to see the tears of excitement that came down her face. Was this estate that Yunqing was sent to? He Hung didn't think anyone would have the nerve to interrupt their admiration of the scenery. He frowned as he looked over at Yunqing, blind to the tears on her face. He asked harshly, who let her in? Weren't you ordered to guard this area and not let anyone in? A steward hurriedly ran over and knelt with a bang in front of them. This humble person greets Wang Yat, Wang Fei. Please forgive us. She is this humble person's wife. Just now, she came here to deliver food to this humble person, and accidentally came in. It was this humble person's slip. Please, forgive this humble person's wife. He started kowtowing. Chu Qingju lowered her head to look at the man dressed in the blue clothing of a steward. He was short and slightly plump, beads of sweat running down his forehead as though he was very worried for Yunqing. Yunqing didn't attend to the man pleading mercy for her. She came forward a few steps to kneel in front of them, wailing tragically, Wang Yat, Nu has finally seen you. Chu Qingju saw that He Heng's expression was ugly, but he didn't seem to want to speak to the woman. She could only scold, outrageous, how can you speak so in front of Wang Yat? Yunqing's face paled. She stared with fear at Chu Qingju. This was the woman who'd sent her out of the Fu and married her to a short and fat man. Now, she wasn't a pure woman. How could Wang Yat want her now? Nu forgot on account of seeing Wang Yat. Please forgive me, Wang Fei. Yunqing gave another bow. She didn't speak any further but continued sobbing, her thin shoulders slightly trembling and appearing very pitiful. The short and fat man who had been begging for mercy on her behalf stopped in a daze after hearing her words. He hadn't thought that the woman he was protecting with all his heart would say such unrestrained words. His face started to change over and over, feeling extremely embarrassed. He frowned in irritation, looking visibly sick of the whole matter. His left index finger impatiently tapped the handrail. As a woman who is now married, you should pay more attention to how you speak. Chu Qingju saw that the steward Wang Dong was still in a daze and added, Steward Wang, take your wife and leave. She didn't understand what Yunqing was thinking. A man had sent her away. Naturally that meant he no longer had any interest in her. Why do something like this and make her future days harder? Wang Dong woodenly made a kowtow and pulled Yunqing along as he started to walk, not caring as Yunqing tripped and stumbled behind him. After he pulled the other to a place where he couldn't see Wang Yat and Wang Fei, Wang Dong silently released Yunqing's hand. Yunqing said resentfully to Wang Dong, Move, I don't need you controlling me. When she had finished, she felt a pain burning on her face. Wang Dong had hit her. Yunqing stared wide-eyed in disbelief. This weak and cowardly man dared to hit her. Shameless. As he spoke, the slightly plump face of Wang Dong didn't have any expression. None of the gentleness and emotion that had appeared in the past was visible now. Yunqing stilled. She saw Wang Dong turn and walk away, refusing to look at her again. Her mind fell into a sea of emptiness. He felt that his ears were finally clean. A beat later, he revealed a satisfied smile as he pointed in the other direction and informed, There's a very big mouth over there, the pool is even bigger than the one in the pavilion. But the surroundings are not good, so only an open hot spring was constructed. When the weather warms, we could play there like ducks. Chu Qingju glanced in the direction that Yunqing left in. She smiled, nodded her head and announced, Then, I'll have to take a look. To want something that one could never receive, that person's life was fated to be a tragedy. Chapter 58 Assassination? It was not a secret that Cheng Wang had been wounded in the arm by the assassins. Even though the wound had healed, but the Tai said there may be remaining symptoms. When it was winter, there would be unbearable pain. So the imperial doctors gave a suggestion that Cheng Wang soak in the hot springs whenever he was free. This would be of benefit to his bones. But He Ming didn't have many properties in the first place, and he didn't have any hot springs. Just at that time, he coincidentally heard that Erge had gone to his estate to soak in the hot springs. He instantly clapped his hands, and personally sent an invitation expressing that he wanted to go to the hot springs at Fulang Manor. This move, in the eyes of others might have been a coincidence, but in the eyes of those using their heads, it held a different meaning. They understood that His Highness Cheng Wang had returned for a few days to Jing, but why didn't anyone already suggest the hot springs earlier, but only at this sensitive time? Suspicions could only remain suspicions. Cheng Wang wasn't participating in the battle for the throne, he wasn't usually a brave person. No one at the court cared about him, putting their focus on the rankings from the spring examinations and the criminal behind the assassination incident. As to the victim that had been nearly assassinated, because the emperor didn't place any importance, he was simultaneously overlooked. He Hung had received He Ming's missive at the palace gate. The characters that He Ming wrote on the paper were like him, proper, straightforward and regular. It didn't have any style, but no one would dislike it. He Hung gave the missive to Ming He, go personally to Cheng Wang Fu, say that Ben Wang, as his elder brother, will always welcome his ditty. Ming He nodded, turning and getting on a horse. He sped up as he made his way to Cheng Wang Fu. He Hung looked in the direction that Ming He left in. He raised his head to look at the sky. Frowning, he said, "This sky doesn't look very pleasant, the mist has come in so early. We should head back to the manor early." Qian Chong Xin came forward to put down the curtain of the carriage that He Hung was sitting in. Turning his head, he sent a look at the guard driving and indicated for him to leave quickly. When the carriage trotted its way out of the city gates, the mist had already become thicker. Even the sky was dark and heavy. Occasionally, bursts of cold wind blew by. Qian Chong Xin rubbed his arms and inhaled a breath. This cold snap was too strong, today was much colder than the previous days. He looked carefully at the road ahead, suddenly seeing the grass on the side of the road moving. He indicated for the carriage to stop. Before the carriage had completely stopped, he flipped off to stand in front of the entrance the carriage, shrieking, "Guards!" This high-piercing shout rang out in the mist and caused the guards to shudder. When they managed to react, they saw almost 20 men wielding large blades leaping out of the grass, heading straight and chopping at Wang Yi's carriage. Arrows flew out of the woods randomly. It was lucky that there was a layer of iron on inside the carriage. Qian Chong Xin had closed the door to the carriage in time so those arrows all dropped outside the carriage, but one arrow, taking advantage of that moment Qian Chong Xin was shutting the door, quickly pierced inside. "Come protect Wang Yat." Qian Chong Xin unsheathed the large blade that the driver had on his back, guarding against the assassins that were heading to the side of the carriage. The guards knew very clearly if something did happen to Wang Yat, they didn't need to live. They could only grit their teeth and fight. If they didn't die, a good life awaited them. If they died, it was showing their loyalty to the very end. Because no one had expected that someone would dare to assassinate a Wang Yat on the main road, He Hung hadn't taken many guards with him. After a period of time, the situation turned for the worst. Commander Sun felt that he had definitely offended the gods this year. He had just taken the Imperial Guards for a casual patrol in the Jing suburbs and he could encounter an assassination attempt. The target also had to be His Highness Duan Wang. When he saw the scene, his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. He hurriedly sent his subordinates to help. The assassins hadn't expected that the Imperial Guards who preferred to patrol inside the city would appear here, quickly retreating. The only thing they left were a few corpses that had been killed by the guards. Wei Chen was late in protecting. "Has Your Highness Duan Wang been wounded?" Commander Sun saw the assassins retreat and waved his hand to let the subordinates give chase, he himself getting off the horse and kneeling on one knee in front of He Heng's carriage. Qian Chong Xin also got off the carriage, kneeling in front as well. "It was us that was useless," and startled Wang Yat. The door to the carriage slowly was pulled open. He Hung walked out under the worried and fearful looks of everyone present. Qian Chong Xin looked at the sleeve of his right hand which had been dyed crimson with blood. He was so afraid his legs were soft. "Wang Yat, you were wounded." When Commander Sun heard the words, the sweat on his forehead started to flow down. He raised his head to take a look and saw that the sleeve of Duan Wang's left hand was completely drenched in red, his right hand holding an arrow speckled with blood. Just a graze, it didn't reach the bones. Finishing, he gave the arrow to Xian Xin. This arrow was left behind by the assassins that wounded Ben Wang. Hopefully this will be helpful to Commander Sunday. Commander Sun received the arrow from Xian Xin. He found that it was a very normal arrow. The arrow had made from normal iron, and there were no special attributes about the feathers at the end of the arrow. Wang Yat, please do not worry. Wei Chen will definitely investigate this matter thoroughly. Finishing, Commander Sun let his subordinates take away the corpses on the ground. He picked up the remains of the blades and the scattered arrows, hoping to find a clue from those pieces. By this time, Ming He had caught up from the city, and found that Wang Ye had nearly been assassinated and was wounded. He could only turn his head around to the Imperial Hospital to find a Tai. After Commander Sun left, He Hung allowed the servants to give a makeshift treatment to his wound. He announced to the people present, "Today, everyone here will be rewarded according to their deeds. The fact that Ben Wang could leave here safely is all due to your efforts." The guards bowed in thanks, their hearts beating faster. Wang Ye hadn't punished them because of being wounded from the assassination but had rewarded them. It didn't waste their efforts in fighting with their lives. After He Hung returned to sit inside the carriage, he covered his wound, his face not showing any of the fear and anger after being attacked by an assassin. Climbing up from the hot spring, Chu Qingju put on new clothing and felt her back strangely become cold. She walked back into the inner room, asking Mujin and the others who had been standing guard outside, "Has Wang Ye returned to the manor?" "Wang Fei, there hasn't been anyone who has reported so." Mujin saw the hair of Wang Fei was loose, the strands still dripping water, and took a piece of cotton to dry Chu Qingju's hair for her. After just a few wipes, she saw Huang Yang rushing in. Seeing that she was drying her hair, he hesitated before reporting, "Wang Fei, Nikkei has heard that Wang Ye was attacked. He's coming back to the estate now." "Attacked?" Chu Qingju's voice rose. She stood, saying, "Follow me to take a look." Finishing, she rushed out the door. Mujin paused and then threw the cloth to one side. She grabbed a sandalwood hair comb before following. Wang Fei's hair was still dripping. It wouldn't be good for the servants to see her hair down and loose. Chu Qingju was very clear that a person like He Hung wouldn't be easily wounded by others. But the road from the city gate to the manor was a major road. What person had the bravery and drive to stage an assassination attempt at that kind of place? "Wang Yat, Wang Fei is here." Just as Qian Xin's voice sounded, He Hung saw Chu Qingju walk in from the outside. He saw that she was wearing a simple wide-sleeved blue-girdled dress, her hair carelessly brushed behind her back. It looked like it wasn't even dry. "Wang Yat, how are you?" Chu Qingju walked in front of He Hung. He was sitting in front of the desk. The light-colored robe that he wore as he had left in the morning was changed for a blue soft silk robe, white muslin wrapped around his left arm. "I'm fine, sit here." He patted the spot beside him, motioning for Chu Qingju to side beside him. As Chu Qingju sat down, her gaze still stayed at his wound, but the white muslin covered the wound. "What's going on? Why did the assassins come? Who has such daring?" Finishing, she furrowed her eyebrows. "How's the wound? Has the Tai been summoned?" "It didn't reach the bone, just a graze from the arrowhead." He Hung smiled, "The Tai will arrive soon." Just as he said so, Ming He brought the Tai in. Seeing Wang Fei's hair flowing free, he paused before reacting with a bow, announcing, "Wang Yat, Wang Fei, the head of the Imperial Hospital has arrived." Wei Chen greets Wang Yat, "Wang Fei." The head of the Imperial Hospital was over half a century old but still energetic. He saw that Wang Yat and Wang Fei were sitting extremely close and instantly understood. The outside always spoke of how good the relationship was between the Du and Wang couple. He had thought it was just a rumor, but today he saw that it did seem true. "Please stand. Look at Ben Wang's wound and stop Wang Fei from fretting so much." He Hung extended his left arm. He gave a faint smile and teased, "Don't purposefully make it too serious." "Yes." The dean carefully untied the white muslin wrapped around the wound. He saw the wound on Duan Wang's wrist was very long, it did seem like a graze from an arrow. The appearance was very frightening, but it hadn't made any significant damage. Chu Qingju inhaled sharply. She watched as the Tai skillfully treat the bloodstains on the wound before putting a poultice on and wrapping the injury. Wang Yat, your wound might not have reached the bone, but the wound is very large. It will take a few days of recovery and cannot touch the water in these next days. Remembering that Wang Ye had come to this manor specially to soak in the hot springs, the dean felt sympathy for the injured person. Why was Duan Wang get attacked, or who directed it? It wasn't important to him. The most important was that he wouldn't be dragged in. After the dean finished everything, he stood to bid farewell. Ming He personally sent him off and presented a large amount of fees. Dean Darren, you say, with Wang Yi's wound, should he rest peacefully for a few days? Peacefully? The dean ruminated for a second before smiling and assuring, naturally he should rest peacefully and recover. Wang Ye might be busy usually, but he would have to make himself idle in the next little while. This one understands. Thanks for your trouble, Dean Darren. Darren, this way. Ming He gave a bow and smiled as he made a motion in the direction of exit. Ming Gonggong doesn't have to be so courteous. No need to send me off, farewell. The dean returned half a bow, smiling before he sat on the mule cart to leave the manor. Ming He looked at the mule cart as it left, giving a bark of laughter before turning to return to Yu Yunlu. Ah, how did I come out with my hair down? Chu Qingju suddenly stood from her seat. She held her hair, hurriedly declaring, Wang Yat, I'm going back to the inner rooms. Turning, she muttered, so embarrassing. He Hung thought about her state just now and couldn't help but laugh out loud. In the inner room, Chu Qingju slightly frowned. This matter didn't seem right somewhere. But the finer details determined success and failure. She had been so worried she came out with wet hair to see He Hung. Such concern, did it count as coming from the heart? Thinking about the fierce wound, Chu Qingju furrowed her brows. She then thought, these assassins were very stupid not to poison the arrows. They really wasted a very good opportunity. Chapter 59 The Grace of the Emperor. Putting up her hair, Chu Qingju came out again to see He Hung was sitting on a recliner reading a book. She unhesitatingly sat down next to him. Wang Yat, an assassination attempt is a serious matter. Shouldn't we tell Mu Fei and let her know you are not seriously wounded to stop her from worrying? He Hung nodded, you are the most considerate. Finishing, he called for Qian Chong Xin and gave out his waist plate for him to enter the palace to see Jing Guifei. He was to clearly tell the process, and the important point was that his wound wasn't serious. Qian Chong Xin hurriedly left the manor. Even though it was late now, even if the palace was already locked, he had to think of a way to pass the message into the palace. The guards at the city gate recognized Qian Chong Xin as Duan Wang's personal Tajian. They didn't ask any questions before allowing him to pass. By this time, the news that Duan Wang had been attacked by assassins had spread through Jing city. They saw the rush that Qian Chong Xin was in. Who would dare to block him? Entering the palace gate, Qian Chong Xin scurried as he traveled to Zhongjing Palace. Before he could state his intentions, he was ushered in by the servants of Zhongjing Palace. When he entered the room, he didn't dare to see the expression on Jing Guifei's face, submissively kneeling on the ground, announcing, Guifei Niang Niang, His Highness has sent Nikkei to come give a morning greeting to Niang Niang. How is Wang Yi's condition? Jing Guifei's voice was heavier than usual, but she still didn't lose her composure. Ding Mama, the person standing by her side, was the only one that found that the hand Niang Niang had was tightly grasping on the arm of the chair, the fingers almost white. It was clear how worried Niang Niang was. The Dean of the Imperial Hospital has already seen to it. His Highness isn't seriously injured, it just grazed the flesh. Wang Ye and Wang Fei were afraid you would become worried listening to the inaccurate rumors and sent Nikkei to personally tell. Finishing, he obediently recited the string of events, not emphasizing or distorting any part. After Jing Guifei heard the course of events, she was much calmer. She thought for a while with half-lidded eyes before she raised her head to inform Jianchong Xin, "You go and tell His Highness to recover for the next few days in the manor. Sent more people to the manor to protect your Wang Ye and Wang Fei." Finishing, she stood and rubbed her cheeks. She raised her head slightly as she announced, "Ben Gong is going to Tianqi Palace to beg to see the emperor." It wasn't only Shu Guifei that could use the trick of injuring oneself to gain another's sympathy. She, Wei Xian Qi, also could use it, and she would use it better, and without a trace. Reaching up to take out a few hairpins from her hair to let the finely crafted hairstyle become loose, Jing Guifei took out a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her eyes. Suddenly, her foot tripped and she stumbled as she walked towards the outer room, wailing tragically, "Your Majesty, our child!" As she ran, a few locks of hair fell loose, framing her face and making her look even more sorrowful. Ding Mama quickly wiped the corners of her eyes with force, choking as she followed, "Niang Niang, Niang Niang, be careful of where you step." As the words landed, the person had already disappeared from the room. Qianchong Xin's face was full of reverence as he looked at the empty door. A beat later, he climbed up from the ground. When he walked out of the inner room, he saw the palace maids and Tajian, each covering their faces, sobbing or looking fretful. In this instant, he felt he had a very large room for improvement. In the end, no one knew that Jing Guifei said when she went to Tianqi Palace. But that night, Qingde Emperor sent out many imperial decrees. The junior Minister of Justice, the Minister of Justice, the Commander of the Imperial Guards all received a decree. The meaning was they could sacrifice everything in order to find the mastermind. It showed just how furious the emperor was about the matter. Other than that, Qingde Emperor bestowed many different kinds of rare herbs, gold, silver, jewelry, and outstanding martial arts guards, Tai skilled in treating all kinds of injuries. This night, the gate of Jing City seemed to open and close and open as an endless stream of gifts were delivered from the palace by horse courier to the Fulang Manor where Duan Wang was recovering. A low-ranked soldier that guarded the gate looked at the fast horses as they disappeared into the night. He said with some awe, "The emperor treats His Highness Duan Wang so well." A senior soldier snorted at the side, "Other than Rui Wang, Duan Wang is the most favored by the emperor. Did you see the emperor this worried when Cheng Wang was attacked last time?" If they didn't already know, they would have thought that Duan Wang and Cheng Wang's injuries were reversed. It could be seen that a person just didn't have to choose a father when he reincarnated, but also the mother. Otherwise, why was it that they were all imperial sons, but the care was so drastically different? "Are you suicidal? Are you allowed to discuss the matters of the Wang yet?" Commander Sun passed by on his horse. Hearing the conversation, he said with a heavy face, "Shut the gates." The expression of the two changed with fright. Along with the others, they obediently closed the city gate. The result was that not long after, they saw a few more people speeding on horses, a gold token held up in one hand. They instantly understood, oh, this was also from the palace heading to Fulang Manor. On the backs of the horses were several boxes wrapped in bright yellow cloth. The gatesmen didn't know what was inside, but their expression was wooden. "How many horses have already passed by?" Chu Qingju disguised a yawn and looked at the piles of gifts in front of her. She turned to look at the lazily sitting He Hung. Smiling as she commented, "The emperor has such care for Wang yet, how many rounds of gifts have already come?" With an expression like a smile yet not a smile, He Hung glanced at Chu Qingju before flipping a page of his book. "It will be better tomorrow. By that time, we would have had a good sleep. Regardless, I'm not going to court any time soon. I can accompany you now." This disdainful tone might be a bit too hurtful. Chu Qingju blinked her eyes. "Doesn't Wang Ye have to rest to recover? Ben Wang was frightened and needs to see the mountains and water to comfort the soul." He Hung smiled as he closed the book. He looked at Chu Qingju as he commanded, "Qingju has to keep me company. Otherwise, I would be frightened if I was alone." Chu Qingju raised the corner of her mouth to make her smile brighter. Don't be afraid, Wang Ye, I will keep you in good company. He Hung smiled broadly. Qingju is so kind. Standing in the corner, Ming He and the others buried their heads. The tactics of Wang Ye and Wang Fei as they teased and flirted were better and better. As the servants, they had to pretend to not hear, and control their expressions. It was very hard. Imperial decree has arrived. The two exchanged a look and calmly patted at the non-existent dust on their bodies before they knelt in the center of the room. After the Tai recited the decree and the gifts, Chu Qingju, as the uninjured party, took over the imperial decree and bowed to give thanks. She watched as the Taijian present the items and then as the Taijian quickly left. Randomly opening a box, Chu Qingju's eyes narrowed. 100-year-old blood ginseng, very rare stuff. She tilted her head to look at He Hung and found that the other didn't even look at the items in the box. Closing the box, Chu Qingju asked, why don't Wang Ye sleep first? It's all right if I stand guard. Just a minor injury, don't worry like this. He Hung smiled helplessly, knowing that the other was worried about his wound. He assured, it's past 11 now, there shouldn't be any more. Finishing, he used the right hand which wasn't injured to pull the person to sit beside him. Chu Qingju followed and sat. She sighed, saying, if they find the mastermind, they must punish him strictly. Don't worry. In the end, someone will be punished. He Hung clasped her hand as he said, after a few days, Cheng Wang might be coming to the manor. You need to get someone to prepare a residence. Si Shu. Chu Qingju stilled before smiling as she mused, that's true, soaking in the hot springs would be good for Si Shu's body. He Hung kissed her cheek, my Qingju is so smart. Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow, is Wang Ye comforting a little child? He Hung laughed lightly. The result was he was bitten firmly on the shoulder by Chu Qingju, which ended up with him laughing even more joyously. Chu Qingju pushed her head onto the other's chest, gave a yawn, rubbed a few times before she closed her eyes. Seeing the person in his embrace sleeping like this, He Hung smiled helplessly. Just before, she had said for him to go sleep first, how did it turn out to be her falling asleep first? Thinking of how the person he was hugging had looked as she ran in with her flowing hair, He Hung's heart felt ticklish. Even though she had not been wearing makeup, her hair a tangle, but in his eyes, she was the most beautiful at that instant. Gently touching a finger to the slightly moist lips, He Hung's lips curled. Even his eyes were full of mirth. On the second morning, the court had turned into a mess due to the fact Duan Wang had been attacked. The incident with the envoys hadn't been cleared yet, and now Duan Wang was also attacked by assassins. It was lucky that the Imperial Guards had patrolled in that area. If Commander Sun hadn't went to that location, who knew how bad the situation would have been? Qingde Emperor was in a rage, ordering the Imperial Guards, Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court to cooperate at the highest level and find the criminal. He even said at court, if they couldn't make clear of the matter of Duan Wang being attacked, then the three top officials of these three places would not stay there. The only imperial son left at court, He Qi, thought suspiciously, did Lao San really do this? Commander Sun felt fortunate at this time. Thankfully he had been hearing about robbery occurring at a certain place outside the city these past days. It was why he decided to patrol there yesterday. Who knew he would coincidentally save Duan Wang? This was a boon from the gods. But who was that person that reported to him that robberies were occurring at a spot outside the city? He remembered that low-rank soldier's appearance was very normal. He couldn't remember what he looked like. He was the commander, but there were several thousand people in the Imperial Guards. Was he to know all of them? Really unable to remember about the person, Commander Sun gave up. It was just a coincidence, the heavens helping him. Otherwise, if Duan Wang had died due to an assassination when he was the commander of the Imperial Guards, he might not have been able to keep the hat on top of his head, but his head would have dropped along with the hat. In Cheng Wang Fu, He Ming finished listening to the servant report on the matter of Erge being attacked by assassins. He thought for a beat before ordering, "Prepare the gifts for Duan Wang." Ben Wang might be going to Fulan Manor in a few days to accompany Erge in his recovery. As expected, in the afternoon, the Fulang Manor sent someone to Cheng Wangfu. They said that Fulang Manor was beautiful and clean and the Tai there were skilled at treating injuries. They hoped that His Highness Cheng Wang would stay for a few days at Fulang Manor to soak in the hot springs and let this Tai look at his wounds again. Chapter 60 Erge, Are You Showing Off Your Love? The White Jade Hot Spring, in Chu Qingju's eyes, was just a small swimming pool. She happily did a few strokes of butterfly, and then backstroke. She swam from one side to another before she stopped to lean forward on one side and looked at He Hung, who was sitting near the edge, drinking tea. It's such a pity that Wang Yi's wounds haven't healed yet. Otherwise, we could be soaking together. She saw the other's eyes glance in her direction. Her feet pushed off and she swam away. Seeing Chu Qingju treat the hot spring as her personal swimming pool, He Hung smiled helplessly. Even though the other's actions were a bit annoying, her posture was very beautiful. His gaze fell upon the body in the pool. She was wearing a red body-length dress embroidered with a scale pattern. It spread out in the water, making her look like a mermaid. There was a beautiful dash of red in the pool, and then she purposefully struck a seductive pose. When he saw Chu Qingju throw her head back, revealing the clean and white neck, He Hung gulped a large mouthful of tea to cool the heat inside. It wasn't good to soak for too long in the hot springs. Chu Qingju climbed on the jade stairs beside the hot spring to leave the pool. After using a large cotton cloth to towel herself down, she took off the now transparent scale dress right in front of He Hung. She tied a large loose robe around her body, walked towards He Hung and bent down to pick up his teacup. She smiled as she commented, "Wang Yet, drinking too much tea can cause your wound to scar." He Hung was too busy admiring the picture of the beauty in the bath, and had forgotten about his tea. He reached out with his right hand to pull the other into his embrace, the teacup falling to the floor with a tinkling sound. "Since I cannot drink tea, why don't I have a taste of a beauty instead?" Chu Qingju's finger gently swiped across the bandaged wound on He Hang's left arm. She gave a smile full of regret and uncertainty, but the Tai said Wang Ye has to rest. The Tai didn't say that Qingju had to rest. He Hung moved as he held the person closer. A certain part that was exceptionally alert coincidentally touched Chu Qingju's sensitive part. Why doesn't Qingju exercise some more? Chu Qingju twisted. Seeing the other inhale, she breathed softly and licked at his neck. Is Wang Ye asking Qi to help? As his right hand caressed that willowy waist, He Hang's voice trembled. Is Qingju willing to help? Her arms wrapping around He Hang's neck, the corner of Chu Qingju's mouth curled, looking unspeakably enticing. The tip of her tongue swiped across her lips and she asked in a light voice, "Wang Yet, why don't you take a guess?" Their gazes met. In the midst of the white steam obscuring the room, the two curled around each other, igniting the excitement and tension in the room. More than an hour later, Chu Qingju and He Hung came out together. Chu Qingju only had a red jade hairpin in her simple hairstyle and wore a wide-sleeved dress as red as the sunset. When contrasted against the black cotton robe of Wang Yat, it looked extremely picturesque. He Ming was escorted by the servants to his residence. He coincidentally saw Erge and a red-clad woman walking together. He paused momentarily before lowering his eyes as he quickly walked in front of the two. "Good morning, Erge, Sao." "Good morning, Si Shu." Chu Qingju lowered her head slightly and took a small step back. "You finally came. Wei Xian has been hoping for a long time that you would come." He Hung released Chu Qingju's hand. He said with a smile, "Go see your residents first. If there is anything lacking, just order them." "Thanks, Erge." He Ming cupped his hand over his other in a fist. He, along with his entourage, followed the manor servants to his residence. His rooms were not far from Yu Yun Tower. It was called Joyful Jade Pavilion. Located beside his rooms was a hot spring. This seemed to have been specially arranged for He Ming. He Ming looked at his surroundings. The furnishings were all very fine, even the color of the bed covering were what he usually used. Sitting down at the carved pear wood table, the Yawan came in with tea and refreshments, presenting them to He Ming. Just as he took a drink, He Ming saw Ming He coming in with a smile. He gave a respectful bow before he spoke. Your Highness Cheng Wang, our Wang Ye said that after you have rested, he invites you to join him for the evening meal at Jade Cloud Tower. If your Highness is not used to this room, Nikkei will get the servants to change it immediately. This place is very good, nothing needs to be changed. Give my thanks to Erge. He Ming smiled, pushing his teacup to one side. It is me who is disturbing him. Gong Gong, please tell Erge that I will arrive on time. Your Highness Cheng Wang exaggerates. You and our Wang Ye are brothers. There isn't any disturbing here, Ming He bowed as he replied. Nikkei will report back to Wang Ye now. Your Highness, please have a good rest. He gave another bow before shutting the door as he left. Once the door was closed, the rooms became much quieter. He Ming deduced that the servants were purposefully stepping lightly as they passed by his rooms, clearly being careful so that his rest was not disrupted. Erge's people are very proper. He Ming spread his arms, allowing his personal Tajian Sun Hai to undress him. After his jade coronet was taken down, he leaned back into the sofa. Coming here today means that I am standing with Erge. Sun Hai carefully placed the jade coronet into a box. Hearing Wang Ye say such a thing, he questioned in a small voice, Wang Ye, you came here to recover, why? I'm already in the middle of the situation, who can I avoid it? He Ming laughed carefree. In any case, it wouldn't be as bad now. More so with Erge. He may be usually warm and polite, but he certainly isn't a benevolent and soft-hearted person. Lauda might be straightforward and generous on the surface, but in reality he was narrow-minded and remembered only offences, not boons. To ally with such a person, the other wouldn't have gratitude for his allies unless every venture was successful. Lao San's personality is arrogant and brash, his heart only has power, not the people. To be close to such a person, even if he became the emperor, there wouldn't be any easy days. As He Ming spoke, his tone changed, but Erge, his personality isn't as generous as Lao Da's, but he doesn't look at everyone haughtily. His thoughts might be deep, but he isn't a fickle character. As long as nothing seriously wrong occurs, there will be at least some feeling. Originally, he had been hesitant, but when he saw Erge and Sao holding hands as they walked, he made his decision. As an emperor, he naturally couldn't be compassionate and lenient, but he would not be completely emotionless. Someone like Erge was perfect. Sun Hai didn't understand why Wang Ye suddenly made such a decision, but as a personal Tajian, aside from loyalty, he also had to know when to speak. So he only needed to follow Wang Yi's orders. Go deliver the gifts Ben Wang brought to Jade Cloud Tower. Say that this is the regard Ben Wang has as a deity. He Ming stood. Go, Ben Wang will rest. Yes, Sun Hai looked at the bed that had already been prepared and carefully retreated. Chu Qingju looked at the heap of gifts that Cheng Wang had delivered. He had included items that were suitable for women. It looked like he had even prepared gifts for her. She turned to look at He Hung, who was toying with a jade lion biting a ball. For some reason, she was reminded of the lion that had won the ball in the New Year's lion dance. Wang Ye likes this jade statue. Chu Qingju smiled as she asked, this lion is good looking, so majestic. The multicolored pearl in the mouth was also carved well. Returning the jade statue to the box, he closed the lid. He Hung commented. It's very rare that Si has such intentions. Chu Qingju smiled, nodding. Si Shu is really too polite. He can come freely, but why send over so many gifts? Her eyes swept over the jade lion box. She thought calmly, the busy little student Ming wasn't as honest as he appeared. That made more sense. how could a naive child appear in the imperial family? If there ever was a naive child, they would have already been reincarnated into another family. You like it too? He nodded at how Chu Qingju kept gazing at the box. He said, since you like it, then take it. It's just a small ornament. It would be its greatest fortune to make a beauty happy. I'm a woman, what do I want with these lions and tigers? Chu Qingju snorted, in the future, why don't Wang Ye find me some jade lotuses or hibiscuses? I find them more beautiful. She looked disdainfully at the box, it's only you rough men that like fierce beasts that chew raw meat. He fell into speechlessness. It clearly represented grandeur and bravery, such a fierce and majestic lion. Why was it then, that in the words of his Wang Fei, it simply became a beast that only knew to eat raw meat? He immediately changed his point of view. It was just a beast, where was there any other meaning? Even if it did have one, right now, it was just a jade lion. That night, he put on a banquet to receive He Ming. Chu Qingju didn't attend. Even though the separation of the sexes in Dalong dynasty was similar to that of the North and South Song dynasties of the previous life, she was perceptive enough to not meddle in this matter. Chu Qingju's appetite wasn't affected at all as she ate the food that was made for her alone. She was even able to drink an extra half bowl of pearl pheasant soup. Wang Ye said he might drink some wine with His Highness Cheng Wang and that Wang Fei can retire early if tired. Ming He had entered the bottom level of the tower and saw Wang Fei was washing her hands since she had finished eating. He added, Wang Ye also said that he wants to climb the Baiyun mountain with you tomorrow. I know. Get the servants to make some sobering soup. If the banquet is over, serve some of it to the two Wang Ye. Chu Qingju wiped her hands dry. She added, also, pass my words over, Wang Ye should drink less wine, too much wine isn't good for his wound. Yes, Nikkei remembers. After Ming He retreated, Chu Qingju's brow jumped. If he was playing the tactic of self-inflicted injury, then he had to play from beginning to end. The details determined the success. Whatever he shouldn't do, he really was not allowed to do them. After hearing Ming He's message, He smiled helplessly. Turning to He Ming, he said, look, this is the bothersome part of having a Wang Fei. She reminds you at every turn. He Ming saw that even though Erge was complaining, the smile on his face was growing brighter. He replied, Erge, don't get angry. Based on Didi's humble opinion, this is Sao acting concerned for you. No one else would dare to restrict your pleasures like this. It can be seen that Sao has your body in mind. When he finished, he saw the smile on He Heng's face becoming even more visible. He raised a cup to He Ming, it looks like Sid will love his wife in the future. That's a good thing. He Ming followed in raising his cup then drained his cup in one swallow. He Ming said to Ming He, return to tell Wang Fei and say that I know and rest early. Yes, Ming He once again left to ferry messages between Wang Ye and Wang Fei. He Ming seemed to feel that Erge was showing off. But given his understanding of Erge's character, he very quickly rejected the thought and admonished himself for even thinking of it. Sometimes, the truth just accidentally brushed past others.